So let's talk about something that affects pretty much everything we buy and invest in. How can you tell if a company is actually sustainable or just good at marketing? Today, we're going to jump into a powerful new system the EU has been building. It's a potential game changer that aims to turn those vague green promises into cold, hard facts.
Okay, so first things first. To really get what's going on, we have to understand the core problem that this whole massive system is trying to fix.
For the longest time, this has been a massive headache. A company can slap an eco-friendly label on a product, talk about being carbon neutral, but how do we really know? This is the whole issue of greenwashing, right? And it's made it almost impossible to trust what companies say they're doing for the planet. And that right there is where the EU's new system comes in. The entire goal is to sweep away all those fuzzy feel-good claims and replace them with solid, verifiable data. Data that can actually be checked and, crucially, compared from one company to the next. It is a huge push for real transparency. But to really understand what's happening right now, we've got to rewind a bit. This whole revolution didn't just pop up out of nowhere. No, it's actually been decades in the making. This timeline really tells the story. I mean, look at this. It all kicks off way back in 1972 with these big, almost philosophical ideas challenging the whole concept of endless growth. Then you fast forward to 87, and we get our first real definition of sustainable development. Then a huge step in 97. The GRI gives companies a playbook if they wanted to report. But the real pivot point is right there at the end, 2014. That's when the EU says, okay, voluntary is nice, but it's time to make this mandatory, and the NFRD is born. And the NFRD was a big deal, for sure. It was the first time big companies were forced to talk about their environmental and social impacts. But, and this is a huge but, it had a fatal flaw. It was way too flexible. Companies could use different standards, report in different formats. It was basically impossible to compare apples to apples. This lack of consistency is exactly what paved the way for something much, much bigger. So, realizing the NFRD just wasn't cutting it, the EU didn't just tweak the old rules. No, it went back to the drawing board and built something way more ambitious, a fully integrated system. Think of it like a giant machine designed to link policy goals, the flow of money, and corporate reporting all together. Let's look at how it works. And the logic here is just, well, it's brilliant. It all starts with the big vision, the European Green Deal. That's the destination, a climate-neutral continent by 2050. Okay, so how do you get there? Step 2, the money. The sustainable finance package is all about making sure investment capital flows towards green projects and away from polluting ones. But for investors to do that, they need good information, and that's the final piece of the puzzle, the rules. The CSRD tells companies exactly what data they need to provide and how to provide it. Vision, money, rules. Each part needs the other to work. So let's pop the hood on that new rulebook, the CSRD. Because this is where we find the secret sauce, the stuff that makes it so fundamentally different from anything that's come before. Okay, this right here is the absolute game changer. It's this concept called double materiality. For decades, reporting was all about single materiality. Basically, how will climate change or social unrest affect my company's profits? It's the world to the wallet view. But the CSRD adds a whole other mandatory layer. How do my company's operations and products affect the world? That's the wallet to the world view. For the first time, companies have to legally report on their own impact. It's a seismic shift in thinking. And the upgrades are massive across the board. The number of companies covered just explodes from about 11,000 to nearly 50,000. And forget flexibility. Now there's one single mandatory set of rules, so everyone's speaking the same language. Then there's this, and it's so important. These reports now have to be audited by an independent third party, just like a company's financial statements. And it all has to be digital and machine readable so the data can actually be used. The message couldn't be clearer. Sustainability data is now on the same level as financial data. But of course, a story like this is never a simple straight line. Just as this incredibly powerful system is starting to fire on all cylinders, it's hitting some serious political turbulence that could really weaken its punch. And this is where it gets complicated. There's a recent proposal on the table that could dramatically raise the size thresholds for companies that need to report. And the impact would be staggering. We're talking about potentially cutting the number of companies covered by about 80%. That's not a typo. Slashing the scope from nearly 50,000 companies all the way down to less than 7,000.
This quote from our source material really just hits the nail on the head. The idea of changing a law this big before it's even fully rolled out is creating a ton of uncertainty. And it brings up a really fundamental question. Is the EU fully committed to its own transparency goals? Or will these powerful rules get watered down when things get politically tricky?
Okay, so with all this drama unfolding in Europe, you might be sitting there, maybe in the US or Asia, thinking, all right, but what's this got to do with me? Well, it turns out a whole lot, because these rules are already making waves across the globe.
This table lays it out pretty clearly. Right now, the EU's approach is by far the most comprehensive on the planet. That focus on double materiality that we just talked about, plus its wide scope covering environmental, social, and governance topics, it just sets it apart. The US is mostly focused on how climate impacts investors' wallets, and the UK is moving in a similar direction. The EU's framework is just in another league. And here's the kicker. If you're a big American, Japanese, or Chinese company, and you do a lot of business in Europe, guess what? You have to play by these rules too. It's something people call the Brussels effect. Remember what happened with data privacy rules and GDPR? The EU set a really high bar, and pretty soon, companies all over the world started following it because it was just easier than having two different systems. The exact same thing is expected to happen here.
So where does all this leave us? Well, the EU has gone and built this incredible, world-leading machine to bring real accountability to corporate sustainability. No one else has done anything close. But now it's facing some serious pushback from within. The real cliffhanger, the big question mark hanging over all of this, is whether it will have the political courage to follow through on its own massive ambition. What happens next is anyone's guess. Thanks for tuning in.